This is the Brisbane Lions Fancast with Dom Fay and Michael Whiting.
Well, yet again this season we're sitting here, Mike, a little bit lost for answers after what was a very disappointing performance against the Swans on Saturday night.
Yeah, it was but probably I think you were saying just before we came on air, maybe the worst or the hardest to take this season so far, wasn't it? So
yeah, look, this is where, I actually said after the match, this is the worst performance of the year. Now, some people on Twitter held me down for that, saying, no, Port was much worse. The difference between this match and Port for me was, firstly, I think Port Adelaide, when they thrashed us, played much better than Sydney did on Saturday night. Sydney were scratchy at best for a lot of that game. And secondly, because it was at the Gabba. Now, we have been impressive at the Gabba for the most part for a fair while now. We haven't been getting thrashed there for some time. So to lose by 70 plus at the Gabba to a Sydney side far from its best was, pretty disappointing.
it was just a slow kill too, wasn't it? It just, I think Brisbane got within a kick or so midway through the second quarter and then fell away, which has happened a lot at the back end of quarters. I mean, you can take that with a young team and whatnot, but then to not come out after half time and fire much of a shot was really disappointing. And to be honest, and fans probably don't like hearing this as a journalist, but at the game, I didn't really watch the last quarter and a half. I was working on my story already. There wasn't much to be gained out of it. You're sort of looking up every now and then, but Brisbane didn't fire much of a shot. So I think it was disappointing in that regard. And once again, we sort of mentioned this on this show many times this season. We've been looking to the young guys to do quite a lot. And at this stage of the year, it starts getting difficult at 6 or 7 weeks in. These guys aren't used to the AFL intensity week in and week out, and you can just see little signs of fatigue creeping in here and there, and there's a bye not far around the corner, but it's just still too much on too few, and particularly those younger guys having to front up, not only contribute, but be the more prominent players week in and week out. Yeah,
well, Leper has made the decision to go with, younger guys over some of the older guys. For example, a Darcy Gardner instead of a Matt Maguire. Recently, he's gone with Nick Robertson instead of Brent Maloney. Decisions like this, which do rob the side of a bit of experience, but, I mean, you couldn't say that those 2 or 3 or even 4 inclusions of more senior players would have made the difference on Saturday night. It's just a whole team thing. I mean, again, bar Tom Rockcliffe, our senior players were disappointing. I think I realised after the game that really only Rockcliffe, Green and West of the senior players could be proud of their year to date.
You know what you're going to get from Rockcliffe. You don't have to worry with him, whether he's healthy or sick like he was on Saturday night. You just know the production and you know the effort you're going to get, and you can't quite say that for every one of those guys at the moment.
Is there any doubt, though, I suppose, after another performance like that Tom Rockcliffe is our next captain? I think it's just about set in stone now.
Yeah, it is. And he's just got the same attitude week in and week out, and he just lives and breathes the club and would die for it, and it's an attitude that everyone wants to see internally and externally. So it was another great performance by him, but he just needs a few mates to come along with him, doesn't he?
So we look forward to the Essendon match. Now, funnily enough, it was against Essendon last year in round 8 that our season really turned around. We were sitting here, I remember, at the end of round 7, maybe not quite as disappointed in the year, but pretty close.
I think pretty close, because there was a little bit more expectation last year, and Brisbane were being blown away in the first quarter of matches last year. The game was over at quarter time, I think 3 out of the first 6 matches. So I think it was a similar position last year. Different sort of expectations and scenarios and whatnot, but I think the feeling was the same.
And it just so happens we're also in a special edition Guernsey this weekend against Essendon in an old Bears one. So the stars seem to be aligning. I'm not sure what that means for the on-field performance.
I don't know, but
Saturday afternoon.
I remember I did pot you for tipping the Brisbane Lions in this corresponding match last year, and you got it right. So
yeah, I think I got it right to the exact point too. And I think when I tipped it, you said I was being completely unrealistic. So I'm not sure I'll be quite as confident.
That was the kind term I was using on air, mate. It was, but you were right. So
yeah, look, I mean, things can turn around, as you said before, very quickly in footy. Perhaps this is the weekend that they do start turning around. I mean, Essendon aren't a side who have been in great form by any stretch of the imagination.
No, they've certainly battled. I mean, the first 3 weeks they were one of the Cinderella teams of the AFL. Bomber Thompson's in charge this year, and they won 2 out of their first 3 and went within a whisker of beating Hawthorn as well. But the last month's been a real battle for them. They seem to have lost confidence. They're not moving the ball as quickly. The forwards are struggling. Joe Danaher showed a few signs last week, but they're not in great form. They'll be coming to the Gabba expecting to win, and so they should. They're a lot more experienced and probably a lot better personnel on paper at this stage of their careers. But Brisbane would have to look at this one and think they've got an opportunity to play well. If they play well, that they can push the Bombers and possibly even sneak and win, because they're not in great form, Essendon. But it's going to have to take, as we keep harping on, good performances by senior players.
We should move on to our interview with Peter Schwab, though we've gone on a little longer than normal this week. So we will be chatting to Peter Schwab on the Fancast right after this.
The best way to keep track of everything Lions is to head to lions.com.au. It's the first place to find the latest Lions news and videos, get the lowdown on upcoming games, results and player stats. There's also great ways to interact with live chats, downloads and Player of the Year voting updates. And with a social media hub, you can connect with all the Lions social media activity. Lions.com.au. Everything Lions, all in one place.
He's just moved into a new position at the club, looking after retention and recruitment. It is Peter Schwab. Thanks for joining us on the Fancast today, Peter.
Thanks, Tom.
Now, obviously, we'll just kick it off with a pretty basic question. Things aren't going so well on field at the moment. How is the feel off field at the club?
Oh, look, yeah, I mean, I think there's a perception all the time that when you're not winning on field that things aren't going well off field. But, I can tell you that the staff and the players and everyone's, optimistic and just, we just keep working hard week to week. We do what we normally do. We review the performance and then plan for the next opportunities.
Dom mentioned there, Peter, that you've got a new role, the acquisition and retention, I think the title is. Can you, tell the fans and the members out there exactly what that entails?
Yeah, I think, look, when Rob Kerr moved on, there was seen an opportunity to have a look at the whole area of talent and how we acquire it, and then certainly how we retain it. And it was felt that the role would be better suited being based in Brisbane, which I am, to put me across both areas. So the bulk of our recruiting is done probably based in Melbourne, but we do have a network across the country. But Steve Knoll's now probably going to take on a role as a national recruiting manager, so I'll work very closely with Stephen in the area of acquiring the talent, which is twofold. One is probably youth, where the bulk of players will come in the draft. And we also have a pro scouting role that's been put on this year, which is Andrew Farrell, who's also based in Melbourne. He's looking at all the AFL lists, so the players who are potentially available, maybe being out of contract or being able to trade for them. So we're looking very heavily there. And then the whole link to that is my coaching involvement in the club as well, where, I'm very much aware of what Justin's trying to do from a coaching point of view, so the type of players he wants or needs. And I bring that to the table into the recruiting. And then the thing that marries it all into the retention then is working very closely with Manny Lynch, who heads up all that for us. What are we doing once the players are in Brisbane, not only for their football but for them, settling them into the environment and making sure we've got great connections with them and connections back with their families, and what are the things we can do to make their time here in Brisbane easier and enjoyable so that they love their footy and are happy to stay.
Obviously, it is very early in the season still. We're not even at the halfway point yet, but there have been quite a few comments coming out of the club about that the list isn't quite anywhere near where it needs to be yet, or at least it is a long way to go still. And you've just echoed some of those thoughts about how you really need to be looking out there to fill some holes in the list now. It's hard to forecast this stuff, obviously, in May, but do you think it is shaping up that it's going to be a bit of a busy off-season when it gets to that stage?
Oh, I think so. But, it can happen very quickly. We've got probably a list that's, unfortunately, with a lot of our senior players have been injured, so we haven't had those players available for us. So we have turned to a lot of the younger players, and I think they've acquitted themselves really well. What you find with young players is it does take time. It will take, games of experience and games of pre-seasons to build their bodies up. But it can happen very quickly, and, I'm confident that we've got a good group of really good young players, and we'll still draft young players into the club next year, but we'll also look at mature talent as well. Keeping
the kids was obviously a big theme that came out of the end of last year, and I guess part of why the restructure took place at the moment. What do you see as the main thing, I guess, to retain these players and make sure they enjoy their time in Brisbane enough that they'll sign contract extensions and I guess stay in Brisbane long term?
Well, I think players will stay if they feel that the environment they're in is making them better. and that, at the moment we're not winning, but that's not necessarily going to always make you better. But the coaching, we've bolstered the coaching, particularly in our development area. But Justin as a new coach, and I think that's a very important part of why players will commit, and that they see that we have got a vision for the club, and we are trying to bolster the list and improve the list so we can be ultimately successful on field. So I think if you can show players that that's where you're heading and that they can be a part of it, that will go a long way to retaining them.
Well, there has actually been a fair bit of, I suppose, paranoia amongst some fans ever since Andrew Hamilton reported in the Courier Mail quite recently that James Aish has refused to look at deals yet or anything along those lines. Him and the other players, can you give us any indication that there's nothing to worry about, that things are on the right track?
Yeah, look, I think I wouldn't be jumping at shadows because they're still in their first year, and look, we've had conversations with them and certainly with their management, and they're very happy here. But it's as I said to you, it's not necessarily going to happen tomorrow. It needs us to continue to work with them and continue to show them that they're critical to what we're trying to do here. So I'm not spooked or panicked at all by any of those players currently not signing.
Peter, how have you found Justin in his first year? I mean, he's had a very difficult initiation. Not only was it a tough draw to start with, but you touched on earlier the injuries. How have you found his demeanour and I guess his growth in the first couple of months of his career?
I think he's done an outstanding job given the amount of players he's had unavailable to him, but he's got a vision of how he wants the game played. I think he's made that and articulated that very well to the playing group through meetings, but also through training. And early days, we'll keep working extremely hard to help Justin by building a list for him so that we make it a stronger and stronger list, because I think he's on the right track with how he wants to play the game.
And looking at that list, obviously a gaping hole that many people have spoken about for, well, it seems 5-6 years now, is the next key forward to take over from Jonathan Brown. Do you think that next gun key forward is currently on the list, or do you think that's someone who you will have to go out and acquire? I
think we've got some young players who are on the list who potentially should be challenging for that spot, but I also think that's a key for us, that if you had to be honest and say, well, all right, well, if we go into the draft or we go into trading, that's probably our number one priority, and then followed closely by always bolstering your midfield, and then maybe a really good hybrid defender in the Grant Birchall mould would be another focus, I would think. So they're sort of the three priorities. If we can add that'd be terrific, and I think we can.
Peter, just on your role, has the fact that you're sort of changing roles and changing departments a little bit, is that going to take away from the helper side alongside Justin, because you were obviously brought in initially to, I guess, help him and help the coaching department out? Will that lessen your involvement there? Well,
it will slightly lessen my involvement, but more so probably on match day when I might be out, scouting and doing more of the recruiting. But certainly I'll be here during the week. So early in the week, I'll still have the same relationship that I've always had with those guys, and that's the strength of the role, is that I understand what's going on in the coach department, what the coaches are thinking, particularly Justin, and then apply that into my job.
Speaking of that on-field stuff, is there really a feeling within the club that the side that is out there, even though it is filled with a lot of first-year players and they are still learning a new game plan, that they should be performing a lot better than they currently are? Or is there a feeling that, well, there are reasons why this kind of a performance is happening at the moment?
I think there's reasons, and I think if you looked at last week when we went up against Sydney, and again, we just fall away at the last periods of quarters, and before half time, with 5-6 minutes to go, we're 2 points down nearly, or we had a chance to be 2 points down, and we just allow them to kick 3 or 4 quick goals, and going, instead of going at half time maybe 1 or 2 goals down, we're 5 goals down. So there's just that inexperience and lapses that happen, and when I look again at the experience of Sydney compared to us, there's a difference, a significant difference in where they are in their development and their experience as opposed to us, and that's a major factor. And the way the game's played now and umpired, it favours experienced sides because of that. The contested nature of the game is going to favour bigger bodies, and that's something we can't bridge that gap immediately because of our inexperience. But you're talking Sydney, who've been a premiership side in the last 2 or 3 years, and probably another season of being a top 4 side. So we know where we've got to get to. It's just hard to get to that point right at the moment.
It was quite noticeable out there on Saturday night, Peter, the difference in the size of the bodies, and I guess I'm not looking at the guys like Aish and Taylor and Robertson, who are obviously kids, but is that something you do have to chase, a bigger bodied guy? Because the guys that have got 4 and 5 years experience, like the Leicesters and the Reddens and these type of guys, still looked, I guess, quite small next to a Josh Kennedy or a Dan Hanbury or someone.
Yeah, I mean, we'll keep developing our players as best we can from a physical point of view. But the maturity of who you bring in might be a factor. I can't. Again, it's too early to say that we'll bring in a lot more mature talent. But certainly we'll keep working on developing the players we've got.
So if you went into the off-season tomorrow with a very high draft pick, do you think you'd use that to try and acquire a key forward, for example, in the draft, or would you try and trade it for a more mature prospect as a key forward?
Well, that's right at the moment. That's the great unknown because, again, we have to work across both areas. We have to talk to Steve Knoll and his team who are looking at the youth, and they might tell us the next Nick Riewoldt who's sitting there at number, at a pick that we can select. So that's a factor, and then we may have clubs coming to us with options. So, all those things are sort of up in the air.
Do you think you'll enjoy this role, Peter?
Yeah, look, I've always enjoyed talent. I've always enjoyed making sure that we build our list in the best possible way we can. So it's a great challenge, and it's a great challenge to not only have the fact that you can acquire it, but you've got a responsibility also to put things in place that are going to retain them.
Just one more before we do wrap up. Over the last few years, the Lions have chased a number of, high-profile targets, particularly in that key forward role. I mean, you look at Jesse Hogan, Chris Dawes, Kurt Tippett, players who were all mentioned that they were chased at some stage or pursued at some stage by the club. I'm just wondering, there's been rumours about a few others, Jonathan Patton, obviously things that are too early to even enter in discussions with at this stage. But I'm just wondering, with a team that isn't performing superbly on field and, doesn't have the best off-field facilities at the moment, how do you go about selling the club to any potential targets? What is your strategy there that you're going to take? Do you know?
I think you first sell it from a position where you explain to the potential player that this is your current situation, this is how you're building the list, this is the future, this is where you fit in. We think we're on the right track, we'd like you to be part of it. Obviously there's that's the major thing, which is around their football, and then the things that flow from there are about money, of course, and length of contract, etc. And then the third pillar is we do think this is a good place to come and live and play your football. And this is what we'll do for you off the field. These are all the things we can try and help you with there. So I think, like any club, you've got to have a selling point. But I think the number one selling point is the football. I
did say that was the last one. One very quick one to finish up. One thing that fans loved about Rob Kerr was his in-depth trade and draft wrap-ups on the Lions website. Yep. Can you commit to doing anything like that for the fans?
Oh, no, we'll be very open and transparent with that, yeah.
Well, that's great to hear. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us on the show today. We look forward to seeing what you do in the new role.
Good on you, Michael. Thanks, Tom.
It's the first Saturday twilight match this weekend at the Gabba. It's the Lions up against Essendon. This may be this year more out of hope than expectation, but I'm going to do it again. Brisbane Lions by the same margin, 10 points.
It's a good omen.
Why not? It's round 8. It's against Essendon. It's in a Heritage Guernsey. I'm going to call it Lions by 10 points.
Certainly a chance this week. Essendon haven't been setting the world on fire. slowly came back to form last week, but weren't convincing in beating the Western Bulldogs, who are another team that's struggling. So there is a sneaky chance for Brisbane this week if they play for 4 quarters, which they've struggled to do this year.
They absolutely have, but it could all turn around in one game. The reserves are down at HA Oval on the Gold Coast against Southport. That is Saturday at 11 a.m. Head down and check them out before you see the seniors in the afternoon. We will be back next week to review the Essendon match. Until then, that's the Fancast. Bye.
Bye.